Do you have any comments to make on those issues?
Um, well, other than they just shot and killed the guy over in Constantia who was having some sort of a mental health issue. So instead of using their tasers, they just shoot the guy dead.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Grumble and Growl. I'm Gail Tosh, your host, as we examine issues from the local to the global perspective so that you can make better choices. Now, I don't know if you remember, but just a couple weeks ago, we had Michelle Allen on the show, and she was a returning guest. And she came on the show to talk about something called open government and the Freedom of Information Law and the Sunshine Week, which we might be in while we're taping this right now. But the point of this is that Michelle has found herself into some legal trouble because she went to a meeting and she was requiring those people to give open communication to the people who were the constituents of this district. So we have another returning guest on the show today to talk about it. His name is Mike Franklin. You know him as the property tax guy, but today he's here to talk about what he knows about this case, about Michelle Allen, and why we need open government. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
So Mike, can you tell us a little bit about the background with this case?
Sure. I just knew Michelle peripherally as having been a member of the New York State Coalition for Open Government. And I knew her because, she was the vice president of the coalition. I became a member because I was interested in the Freedom of Information Law. She's the chairman of their open meeting law and their committee. And that's how I knew her.
Awesome. Awesome. So what did she do that was so egregious? She asked for some information. Well, can you lay it out how it went down?
Sure. Basically, it's a small town of New Haven, and she's an open meeting law and freedom of information law advocate, and so she would submit freedom of information requests to the town because she wanted to know what was going on with that town, and it's kind of unusual in that their supervisor is a convicted felon, and apparently he's been arrested like 19 times.
What? Are you kidding me? What for what?
I believe it's kind of weird that you can't that all these arrests would be public information. But if you remember the Heidi Allen case, there was a guy from the Post Standard and Lisa Peebles. They wrote a book, and Lisa Peebles was a federal public defender, and she represented the Thibodeaus. Well, they mentioned this guy Barney in that book many times, and I think the purpose was to keep his name in because they just think that I'm assuming that they think that he had something to do with it. But
Wow.
But the other weird thing is that being a convicted felon, I heard that he recently got a pistol permit. You're not supposed to do that when you have a felony. And who did he get it from? I'm assuming from a Republican judge.
Right.
So part of the issue of this whole thing is that the Barney is a Republican, and the sheriff is a Republican, and the district attorney is a Republican, and so it appears as though Barney premeditated this arrest because Michelle had annoyed him with these Freedom of Information Act requests, but also speaking up at the public meetings, and he found that to be inconvenient. So he premeditated with the, he admitted right on police body camera that he had talked to Don Hilton, the sheriff, about all this, and the deputies came in hot. And I would say that they were prepped on this matter, and so so there's a YouTube video called "Audit the Audit" did on the legal ramifications of this case, and he pretty much chewed the sheriffs up. The sheriffs are demanding. The sheriff's deputy says that that if you're under investigation, you have to provide ID. Now, I know that was the case in Nazi Germany. Give me your papers, please.
Right.
But in the United States, it doesn't work that way. Basically, you need probable cause, and certainly they could detain her while they investigated, but they never did an investigation. They took the word of a convicted felon without doing any investigation and arrested her. And what I find most egregious is they took her down made her stay in jail all night, and led her to her arraignment in leg irons. because
Leg irons.
in leg irons
Oh my God.
because she spoke up at a public meeting. So it's pretty clear that the sheriff wanted to teach Michelle a lesson.
Not just teach Michelle a lesson, but give an example to what's going to happen to you if you dare to speak up and ask for the truth from your government here in America. That's horrifying. So I'm thinking that some legal things happened and that this case just has gone away, and because it's ridiculous. And is that what's happened?
Well, yeah. So then the district attorney prosecutes this nonsense, and they spend months, and then they change the charges because they knew they knew that they can't arrest her for not identifying herself. So they changed it to disorderly conduct and just all this nonsense, and it ends up getting dismissed for speedy trial issues because the district attorney didn't do his filings in time. I suspect he did it on purpose because he didn't want the sheriff and the supervisor to be put on the stand. That's what I'm guessing. But in any case, it's either that or the district attorney is incompetent. And I was saying some things about the Republicans, and so I'm not pinning it on the Republicans because this happens with Democrats too. But so when there's no when one party or the other dominates that particular area, there's no competition, and they do whatever they damn well please. And that's pretty much what this is all about. Is that the Barney did got signatures for the district attorney and for the sheriff, and so that's what the Palladium Times was able to dig out of this. All this time, I was wondering, why is the sheriff defending Dan Barney? And until the Palladium Times came up with that political response, I thought it was because Dan Barney had something up on the sheriff's department over the Heidi Allen case. It's the only thing that made any sense. But now that this political thing might make sense, but but anyway, they're picking on somebody they think they can't defend themselves, and they found out differently, and now they're getting sued. And what I'm afraid of is that the case will be settled for 50 grand or 100 grand. What is it going to take for them to change basically they're violating people's Fourth Amendment rights with these, in other words, the training of the sheriff's department. They're training their deputies to demand ID under threat of arrest in violation of the United States Constitution. It's outrageous.
Can you remind us what the Fourth Amendment is?
Illegal searches and seizures.
I see. Well, I've heard some troubling things coming out of Oswego County, from the Child Protective Services to recent run-ins with the police. Do you have any comments to make on those issues?
Well, other than they just shot and killed the guy over in Constantia who was having some sort of a mental health issue. So instead of using their tasers, they just shoot the guy dead. And, just improper training. I mean, they just come in aggressive. Who would call the Oswego County Sheriff's Department for anything? Because nothing but bad things happen when you call these people. And in the case with Michelle Allen, I watched all the body cameras of the incident, and their deputy Pretor is the supervisor, and their deputy Gregory, she's so ignorant of the law, and she's so certain of herself that she can get ID from anybody she wants, anytime she wants. It's obviously training. So there's something leads them to believe what they're doing is appropriate. Something leads them to believe that they can get away with it. And probably that reason is because they can get away with it, because the DA's behind them, probably the judges are behind them. It's outrageous because people in Oswego County, they can't afford attorneys to defend themselves. So they have to absorb the abuse. And so that encourages the sheriffs to do even more. They can do whatever they darn well please.
Yeah, it does sound like intimidation to me, that if you show up to a meeting and you ask a question, they're going to do their best to get you out of that room. I used to run for town office, and when I would go to town meetings, they didn't want me there. They didn't want me asking questions to find out what was going on. So I totally understand the political climate that you're talking about. What can people do after they hear this story? Mike, what do you think people could do to help the situation?
Well, vote. One thing is that you shouldn't vote for somebody just because of their political affiliation. you vote for people because of their integrity. And, we had an issue, of a state Supreme Court judge who issued a search warrant for a black man's rectum. And he's a Democrat, claims he's a Democrat anyway. And they vote him in anyway. And so I guess you get what you deserve when you vote in that fashion. So, or get involved in politics, because the Oswego County Legislature, I went up and spoke before them a couple times on this issue, and I just get nothing but blank stares from any of them. And I'm suggesting you need to take their money away. I don't think you should defund the police, but you don't keep encouraging bad behavior. That sheriff needs to be replaced, because he's obviously, we need another candidate for sheriff, because the guy is, he's not training his deputies properly, and he's getting the taxpayers involved in lawsuits that they can ill afford.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And not a political one. It's not a political point. So
this has nothing to do with politics.
Yeah.
It has to do with people acting in good faith and doing their job properly and competently. It's got nothing to do with politics, in my perspective.
Mike, thank you for bringing this to our attention and keeping us aware of what's going on out there. Is there anything else you want to tell people while you've got their ear?
It was, again, people need to see that the audit and the legal analysis of the situation. It currently has 1.9 million views. So there's obviously some interest in it. But the behavior of Deputy Gregory and Deputy Pretor is just, their behavior is so porky and unprofessional. It's mind-boggling. They got their gun and their badge, and they're just, these tough guys. Just the ego involved is just outrageous. Why can't we have normal people as deputies? People who behave rationally and reasonably, and understand that Michelle Allen is a taxpayer. She's a member of the public. They work for her, and they don't seem to understand that. They seem to think that they work for the sheriff or they work for the county. They work for the public, for God's sake, and they don't understand that. And this leg iron business.
Yeah, that's too much.
It's because she allegedly spoke out at a meeting. All she did was ask a question. She asked, "Are there going to be minutes to your executive session?" That's what she was arrested for.
Oh my goodness. And so they obviously have something they're trying to hide, because they don't want those minutes to come out.
There's just no telling what Dan Barney is doing with that money. And when you have a guy who's a convicted felon, my observation of this guy is he simply doesn't know right from wrong. So he has an excuse for his behavior. He's a criminal.
Right.
But what's the excuse of the DA? What's the excuse of the sheriff? What is their excuse? It's
that's great.
It's I don't know if there's what we're seeing right here is a microcosm of what goes on in the Oswego County Sheriff's Department. So if you think that this is an isolated incident, and again, the audit, this guy has no local connection to anything. It's just a legal analysis, and he plays the body camera. So you can see the behavior of these deputies, and you can see for yourself. And if they behave like this, don't you think it's an isolated incident? It goes on all the time, and it needs to stop. These deputies need to be trained to be professionals, and they're not being trained to be professionals. It's like something out of what you'd expect out of West Virginia or Mississippi is what's going on here.
I can see how passionate you are about it, Mike. Mike, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. Thanks for coming on the show and talking about it today. And you out there, now that you know, and do something about it, whether it's in Oswego where you live, or in the town or district where you actually live, because we need you in these local meetings, and this is the reason why. Mike, thank you so much for showing up.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks.